Hi, this is Kendall Boyson, professional life and recovery coach, and you're listening to Encouragementology, the practice of instilling hope. Hi there. Thanks for joining me. On this show, we're exploring what it means to put things in perspective when life feels like it's coming at you from every direction and you're not quite sure what actually matters most. Have you ever had one of those days, or maybe weeks, where it feels like everything is happening all at once? Not in a dramatic movie scene kind of way, but in that quiet, steady pressure that keeps building? A text comes in, an email you forgot resurfaces, someone needs something from you, something else doesn't go as planned, and suddenly it feels like you're juggling 10 things and dropping most of them. It's not always one big thing, is it? Sometimes it's a collection of small, unrelated moments that somehow tangle themselves together into something that feels heavy, like a drawer full of cords you meant to organize. But now you don't even know where to start, so you just close it and walk away. I've been noticing this lately, not just in my own life, but in the lives of people around me. Friends, family, conversations that all seem to carry that same tone. A sense of being stretched thin, mentally cluttered, emotionally full. And when everything starts to stack up like that, it doesn't just stay organized in neat little categories. It blends together. One concern starts to feel like 10. One problem starts to represent everything. And here's the tricky part. When we're in that space, we don't always respond to what's actually happening. We respond to how it feels. And feelings, especially stressed ones, have a way of exaggerating the story. They zoom in on the one thing that went wrong and quietly blur out everything that went right. So instead of seeing a full picture, we start reacting to a distorted version of it. And that's where things can really start to spiral. Because when everything feels urgent, everything feels important. When everything feels important, nothing feels manageable. And somewhere in that cycle, we hit that point where we just think, I can't do it right now. I don't even know where to begin. So we check out. Not because we don't care, but because we care so much that it all feels like too much. But what if that feeling, that sense of everything piling up, isn't actually a reflection of reality? What if it's a signal? A moment asking us to pause, to step back, to separate what's real from what just feels real. Today, I want to gently walk through that space with you, not to fix everything or solve every problem, but to start untangling the knot just enough to see it differently. Sometimes the shift we need isn't more effort. It's a new perspective. Let's talk about what's really happening when everything starts to feel like too much, because I think this is where we can give ourselves a little bit of relief right away. That feeling of overwhelm, it's real, but it's not always accurate. And that distinction matters. When we say, I have so much going on, what we're really usually experiencing isn't just a full schedule or a list of responsibilities. It's mental and emotional stacking. Things that may not even be connected start piling on top of each other in our mind. A work issue sits next to a family concern, which sits next to something we forgot to do, which sits next to something we're worried might happen. And instead of staying in their lanes, they start blending together into one big, heavy feeling. And here's the tricky part. Our brains don't always organize things by importance. It organizes them by intensity. So the thing that feels the most stressful, the most uncomfortable, or the most unresolved tends to rise to the top and take over the narrative. Even if, in reality, it's just one small piece of a much bigger picture. That's why you can have an entire day that goes right, But one awkward conversation, one mistake, or one unexpected moment becomes the headline when you replay it later. It's not that the whole day was bad. It's that one piece felt louder than everything else. And when multiple loud things show up at once, that's when we start to feel like we're losing our grip. Not because everything is equally urgent, but because everything feels equally loud. So instead of seeing 10 separate situations, we experience one big emotional weight. And that's where the phrase, "I can't even talk right now," comes from. It's not that we've lost our ability to think. It's that we're trying to process too many emotionally charged things all at once without any separation between them. I always think of it like trying to untangle a knot of jewelry. If you look at it all at once, it feels impossible. You don't know where one chain ends and another begins. And after a while, you just want to set it down and walk away because it feels like too much effort for something that should be simple. But if you slow down and isolate just one strand, something interesting happens. It becomes manageable. Not easy or instant, but possible. And that's the shift we're really talking about here. Putting things in perspective isn't about minimizing what's going on in your life. It's not about saying this doesn't matter or I shouldn't feel this way. It's about creating enough space between each piece that you can actually see it clearly. It's the difference between being inside the storm and stepping back just far enough to notice where the rain is actually falling. When everything is tangled together, it feels insurmountable. But when you start to separate it, even just a little, you begin to realize not everything needs your attention right now. Not everything is yours to carry. And not everything is as big as it feels in the moment. And that realization doesn't solve everything, but it does something just as important. It gives you your footing back. Now let's bring in a few outside perspectives, because one of the most comforting things to realize in moments like this is that this experience isn't unique to you. There's actually a lot of research and insight around why our minds do this, why things that are manageable on their own can start to feel completely overwhelming when they stack together. There's a concept in psychology called cognitive overload. It's the idea that our brains have a limited capacity for processing information at any given time. When too many inputs come in at once, decisions, emotions, responsibilities, unknowns, the brain doesn't just slow down, it starts to prioritize differently. It looks for what feels most urgent or most emotionally charged and puts that front and center. Which means in a moment of overload, we're not necessarily seeing things clearly. We're seeing the loudest version of things. And that explains why everything can feel like a priority at the same time. Not because it is, but because our brain is trying to protect us by saying, hey, this feels intense. Pay attention to this. The problem is when everything feels intense, we don't get clarity, we get chaos. There's also a simple but powerful quote often attributed to author and speaker Stephen Covey. He said, most of us spend too much time on what is urgent and not enough time on what is important. And when you're in that overwhelmed state, that line hits a little differently, doesn't it? Because suddenly everything feels urgent. A text message feels urgent. An unfinished task feels urgent. A worry about something that hasn't even happened yet somehow feels urgent too. But urgency and importance are not the same thing. Urgency is loud. It demands attention. It often comes with pressure or emotion. Importance, on the other hand, is quieter. It's steady. It's connected to your values, your long-term direction, the things that actually shape your life over time. And when we're overwhelmed, we tend to lose that distinction. We start reacting to urgency instead of intentionally choosing importance. Another perspective that I love comes from the work of Brené Brown, who talks a lot about how we experience stress and emotion. She explains that when we're emotionally flooded, we often create what she calls the story we're telling ourselves. So instead of just experiencing a situation for what it is, we layer meaning onto it. We start filling in the blanks. This always happens. I can't keep up. Everything is falling apart. And those thoughts feel true in the moment, but they're often built from emotion, not fact. And when you combine that with cognitive overload, it's easy to see how quickly things can escalate internally. A few separate issues turn into one big story, and that story starts to feel like reality. There's even research that shows our brains have something called negative bias, which basically means we're wired to pay more attention to negative experiences than positive ones. It's a survival mechanism. Back in the day, noticing what was wrong kept us safe, but today, it can work against us. It's why one frustrating moment can outweigh 10 good ones. It's why one unresolved issue can sit heavier than everything that's going right. And when you're already feeling stretched thin, that bias can make it seem like your whole world is off balance, even when parts of it are actually steady. So when you step back and you look at it all together, it starts to make sense. Your brain is overloaded. It's prioritizing intensity over clarity. It's reacting to urgency instead of importance. And it's naturally giving more weight to what feels negative or unresolved. Of course it feels like too much. Of course it feels tangled. But here's the thing. When you understand that this is how your mind works, you can start to question the story a little bit. Not in a dismissive way, but in a curious way. Instead of immediately believing everything is falling apart, you can pause and ask, what is actually happening here? Instead of assuming everything needs your attention right away, you can start to gently sort through what truly matters. And that's where perspective begins. Not by forcing calm or pretending things aren't hard, but by recognizing that the way it feels and that the way it is might not be the same. Let's make this a little more real and interactive, because understanding this idea is one thing, but actually feeling the shift is something else entirely. So wherever you are right now, I want you to think about what's been sitting on your mind. That feeling of there's just too much. Don't overthink it, just notice what comes up first. It might be one thing, or it might feel like 10 things all at once. Now, instead of trying to solve any of it, I want you to do something a little different. Imagine taking everything that's in your head right now, all the worries, the to-dos, the conversations, the unknowns, and placing them in front of you. Spread it out, don't put it in a pile, almost like layering papers across a table. And just sit with it for a second. Because when everything is in your head, it feels like one big tangled mess. But when you start to lay it out, even just mentally, something begins to shift. You can start to see edges. You can start to see where one thing ends and another begins. Now, let's gently walk through a few questions together. No pressure to get perfect answers. This is just about noticing. As you look at everything in front of you, ask yourself, which of these actually needs my attention today? Not eventually or someday, but today. You might notice that a few things immediately stand out, and a few things don't. Some of what's been weighing on you might not even require action right now. It just feels like it did because it was sitting in the same mental space as everything else. Then ask yourself, what here is mine to carry and what isn't? This one can be a little uncomfortable because sometimes we're holding on to things that don't fully belong to us. Other people's emotions, outcomes we can't control, expectations that were never clearly defined. When everything is tangled together, we don't stop to question it. We just carry it all. But when you separate it out, you might start to notice that not everything on that table is yours. And then one more question to sit with. What feels urgent versus what is actually important? You might find that the loudest things, the ones that have been pulling at your attention the most, aren't necessarily the ones that deserve your energy right now. And just noticing that, even a little, can create space. The goal here isn't to fix everything in one sitting. It's to interrupt that automatic feeling that everything is equally big, equally pressing, equally yours to handle all at once. Sometimes the most powerful shift is simply going from, I can't handle this, to I can handle this one thing right now. And then maybe the next thing after that. And maybe letting a few things sit where they are without giving them any more weight than they deserve. So if you take anything from this moment, let it be this. You don't have to untangle the whole knot at once. You just have to find one strand and start there. Let's keep going in this vein and bring this into something that you can actually use. Because in those moments when everything feels too much, you don't need more theory. You need something simple that helps you regain your footing. The first thing I want to offer you is this idea of a mental reset pause. When you feel that surge of overwhelm, when your mind starts racing and everything feels urgent, instead of pushing through it, pause on purpose. Even just for a minute. And ask yourself one grounding question. What is actually happening right now? Not what might happen, not what could go wrong, not what this reminds you of, just what is real in this moment. That question alone can start to separate facts from feelings and bring you out of that exaggerated story your mind is trying to tell. The second tool is what I call name it to tame it. Instead of carrying everything as one big emotional weight, start naming things specifically. Say them out loud or write them down. I have a meeting tomorrow. I'm worried about this conversation. I forgot to follow up on that. When you name things individually, they lose that collective power. You move from everything is a mess to these 3 or 4 things I can see clearly. And clarity immediately makes things feel more manageable. The third is a simple but powerful filter. Now, next, or later. Take whatever is on your mind and gently sort it into those 3 categories. What needs my attention now? What can wait until next? And what is truly later? Meaning it doesn't need my energy today at all. This is where you start to reclaim your time and your focus, because not everything deserves access to you in this moment, even if it's asking for it. And finally, I want you to practice what I call gratitude counterbalance. Because remember, your brain is wired to prioritize the negative. So we have to intentionally bring the positive back into view. This doesn't have to be big or dramatic. Just ask yourself, what is steady right now? What is going right in my life? What is okay, even if other things aren't? And I want you to notice how that shifts the weight just a little bit. It doesn't erase the challenges, but it keeps them from taking over the entire story. None of these are complicated, and that's the point. When you're overwhelmed, you don't need a 10-step system. You need something that meets you right where you are and helps you take one step forward. Because that's really what perspective does. It doesn't remove what's hard, but it right-sizes it. It brings things back into proportion so that you can see them clearly. And once you can see them clearly, you can start to move one thing at a time. The A side is the familiar story we all know. When life feels overwhelming, the goal is to calm down, get organized, and regain control. We talk about managing stress, prioritizing tasks, and getting things back into order so we can feel better again. And all of that does have value. It's helpful. It gives us tools and direction. But the B side, that's where the deeper tracks live. What if that feeling of overwhelm isn't just something to fix? What if it's something to listen to? Because sometimes that sense of everything is too much isn't coming from the amount of things on your plate. It's coming from the mismatch between what's on your plate and what actually matters to you. It's not always volume. Sometimes it's about alignment. We don't always like to go there because it's easier to believe that once things settle down, we'll feel better. Once this week is over, once this situation resolves, once we catch up. But what if that feeling keeps coming back? What if it's not just a busy season? What if it's a signal? And that signal might be asking a harder question. Not how do I handle all of this, but why am I holding all of this in the first place? If you really step back, sometimes overwhelm is tied to things like overcommitting, people-pleasing, avoiding difficult conversations, or saying yes when something inside of you wanted to say no. It can come from trying to carry responsibilities that were never fully yours, or continuing patterns that no longer fit the life you're trying to build. And that's where the B side can feel a little uncomfortable because it asks for honesty, not just organization. It asks you to consider that maybe the goal isn't to manage everything better. Maybe the goal is to hold less, to release what isn't aligned, to question what you've been automatically saying yes to recognize where you've been stretching yourself thin in ways that aren't sustainable. That doesn't mean you drop everything or make drastic changes overnight. It just means you start noticing. You start asking, is this mine? Is this necessary? Is it aligned with who I am and where I'm going? Because when your life is aligned, even a full plate can feel meaningful. But when it's not, even a few things can feel exhausting. So the B side here isn't just about finding perspective within the life you have. It's about gently questioning the structure of that life in the first place. And sometimes the most powerful shift isn't learning how to juggle better. It's realizing you don't have to juggle at all. I want to share a simple story with you that I think brings this idea to life in a real tangible way. There was a professor who stood in front of his class holding a large glass jar. Without saying much, he placed a few rocks into the jar until it reached the top. Then he asked the class, "Is the jar full?" And the students said, "Yes." Then he took a container of smaller pebbles and poured them into the jar. The pebbles filled the spaces between the rocks. Again, he asked, "Is the jar full?" This time, the students hesitated, but eventually said, "Probably." Then he poured in sand, which settled into the remaining gaps. "Now is it full?" he asked. And by this point, the class was starting to catch on. Finally, he poured in water, and it filled whatever tiny space was left. Then he explained, "If you don't put the big rocks in first, you'll never get them in at all. The big rocks represent the things that truly matter: your health, your relationships, your values, the things that give your life meaning and direction. The pebbles are the responsibilities, the tasks, the things that need your attention, but aren't the core of who you are. And the sand, that's everything else. The small distractions, the minor frustrations, the things that can easily take up space if you let them. And when we feel overwhelmed, it's often because we've let too much sand and too many pebbles fill the jar before we've made space for the big rocks. So then everything feels full. Everything feels important. Everything feels like it's competing for the same space. But the truth is, it's not that your life is too full. It's that the order got out of alignment. And putting things in perspective is really about stepping back and asking, what are my big rocks? Sometimes the weight we feel isn't coming from what's in front of us. It's coming from everything we've gathered along the way and never set down. Thoughts that don't belong to today, worries that haven't happened, conversations we replay, outcomes we're trying to control before they even exist. And over time, all of that blends together into one steady pressure, as if life itself is asking more from us than we can give. But maybe the invitation isn't to carry it better. Maybe the invitation is to notice what we've been holding without realizing it, and to loosen our grip. Not everything that enters our mind needs to stay there. Not every feeling needs to turn into a story. Not every situation needs to be solved in this moment. There is a quiet kind of wisdom in allowing things to be what they are without immediately trying to organize them, fix them, or make sense of them all at once. Today, I will pause long enough to notice what I'm carrying and give myself permission to only pick up what is truly mine. If you want to share encouragementology with a friend who needs to know they're not alone in this journey of self-discovery, you can visit encouragementology.com or anywhere you stream your content to receive this episode and all others. Check out the show notes for the 5-day journaling companion. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram for additional encouragement throughout the week. So I challenge you. Pause the next time everything feels like it's too much and take one intentional step back. Lay out what's on your mind. Choose just one thing that truly needs your attention and let the rest sit without giving it more weight than it deserves. Trust that you don't have to carry everything at once, just what is yours, just for today. I know you can do it. Thank you for listening to Encouragementology with Kendall Boyson, where we find positive ways to handle some of life's challenges.
I stumbled through until the path was clear. That's when I found you and how I